welcome. My name is Jack Chen. I'm the director of the APA Institute. Really happy to see you all here. First, let's turn these things off. I have to do that myself. First of all, this is really a kind of a welcoming celebration of Byron, Yong, and also Jafferies as our artist in residence for 2009, 2010. I can't believe this is the year it is. I've known Byron for a number of years. He worked with us in the earlier incarnation of the APA Institute when we were still in our old office. And that actually would have been enough reason to have him as an artist in residence. At the time, he was in the musical theater program. And certainly from my point of view, when I think of musical theater, I think of the more traditional, kind of Broadway, mainstream kind of idea of musical theater. But it became very clear after I got to know Byron just a little bit that that's not the kind of musical theater that he was doing. And that that's where he met Aaron. And I think what really sold me on both of them being our artists in residence this year was their kind of engagement with a real incident that happened. Many of you may still remember when it was written about in the New York Times in 2005, in April, in which Ming Kwang Chen was stuck delivering some Chinese food, and he was stuck in an elevator for 3 days. And of course, this is most of us when we hear something like this just kind of, and there's, a lot of us who have family members who work in restaurants or know about this kind of life, immediately think of undocumented workers, the difficulty, the long hours, and all these kinds of things. Certainly those are the issues that are in the background. But what really excited me about what Byron and Aaron are doing is to take that reference, to take that experience, and then turn it into this musical theatrical experience. Now you're going to see that what they're doing is not what we conventionally think of in that kind of way. And I think they're doing this is of a certain kind of moment. We just came through the Democratic primary elections, and for the very first time it looks like we're going to have a Democratic Party candidate representing a city council candidate representing Chinatown for the very first time. After Chinatown has been in New York for 140, 150, 160 years, very first time, right? And not only that, but John Liu, who has been in Queens representing the city council, the very first Asian American representative, is in a runoff now for the Democratic candidate for city comptroller. So there's that moment. Also tomorrow, the reading is going to be at the newly reopened Museum of Chinese in America. And you're going to see that that's in a much larger space, still not large enough, but a much larger space. And there's a certain kind of moment in which I think Chinese Americans, who have been in New York the longest, but Asian Americans in general in New York are being acknowledged and recognized. But at the same time, it's happening in which these kinds of experiences of undocumented workers who oftentimes are in terrible conditions and working under very adverse situations in which they're needing to pay off passage monies, and all of you probably are familiar with those kinds of issues, is going on. So both things are happening at the same time. And we really believe at the APA Institute that it's important for us to be engaging with these kinds of questions. And so for me, this kind of convergence of creative, artistic kind of engagement with this everyday kind of interaction that happens in the streets and happens in apartment buildings of the great majority of people, immigrants who are in New York, is critical. And I really celebrate that, and we really want to be a part of that. But also because this is a work in progress, and we really believe it's important to have kind of expose the seams of the creative process, and not just be thinking of culture as what's on Broadway, and you're kind of behind, you're sitting from the fixed point of view of the audience, and all the magic is kind of meant to be a matter of just seeing the spectacle. But we really believe that it's important to have that give and take, and to really kind of expose what that creative process is. And Byron and Aaron in particular actually came to us saying that that's what they wanted. They wanted to kind of workshop this and kind of get people's reactions and be able to talk about these kinds of questions, and that's going to be part of what begins to shape the actual final performance. So for all of those reasons, we're really delighted to have them here tonight. I should just say that tomorrow is going to be an actual reading of the piece. And even though it's all booked, I think I want to encourage you to maybe RSVP for that. Is that right? RSVP for that? Or just send, this is something I know, okay, Alex, I know it's booked, but still, if you're interested in coming, you should let us know, okay, because we're hoping we can squeeze a few more people in there, and after you kind of get a little bit of a hint, it's going to be really important, I think, for you to come back tomorrow and give your feedback in terms of what's going on, what's working, the kinds of questions you have, those kinds of issues. That's really what this residency is so much about. So, without any more delay, we are going to have Q&A afterwards, so stick around, and welcome Byron and Aaron.
Hello.
Hi,
I'm Byron Yong.
I'm Aaron Jafferies.
We're going to talk a bit about Stuck Elevator. We're going to talk a little bit about ourselves and our work. Then we're going to talk about Yong Chen. Then we're going to actually perform some of the work, keeping in mind that tomorrow's performance has an equity actor, a great director who's actually in the audience, violinist, cellist, scrap metal percussionist, and so forth. So we're kind of giving you a preview, kind of giving you a sense of how we're coming together as collaborators. I'm a composer, Aaron's a librettist, there's also a musician, right? So to give you a sense of what this is, how this may come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about Stuck Elevator
Yeah.
first? And so Stuck Elevator, we've been arguing for a while now about what to call it, like opera or a musical or performance art, performance piece, whatever. So right now, no one won, and it's called an operatic solo performance. Combine some things, and we're still asking people what it actually is. So maybe you can tell us tomorrow. But it's an operatic solo performance that's jumping off of the experience of Yong Chen, which Jack mentioned, which happened in April of 2005. He was working as a delivery man at Happy Dragon restaurant in the Bronx, was making a delivery, got stuck in an elevator after delivering his food, was stuck there for 81 hours. And you found out about this.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm always interested in Asian men on television because it's not a common occurrence. And so all of a sudden, there's this guy plastered, and it was before the elevator. It was when he was missing, because a number of these Chinese delivery men have been killed because they carry petty cash, and they're undocumented, and so they're seen as easy targets. And so it's reported that he was missing, and so his photo started to be shown there. And then, when it was revealed that he was stuck in an elevator for 3 days, it was big news. We have 26 articles about Yong Chen. And so April 2005, I'm here in New York, and I see this guy all over the television and the newspaper. I'm like, who is this? Who is this? And so I read a bit more and thought, that's interesting. This guy is my age. He is from the same area in China that my family is from. There were things that and yet I didn't really know from the newspaper article who he was. Like they talked a lot about the circumstances around him, but I really didn't know who he was, and I still don't know who he is.
we're trying to figure that out, and that's part of why we're really excited about being here, because we have a lot of help and getting feedback and whatnot. My own sort of background and connection. I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, where I still live, and when Byron, I was living in New York at the time of the incident, and when Byron talked to me about it, I hadn't known about it. I didn't watch TV, and so it was, I think my perspective was very different from Byron's, and continues to be. My background in New Haven, I'm not from the same place as my family is not from the same place as Ming Kwang Chen's or Byron's. I'm actually part Greek, Slovak, English, Irish, Scottish, a white boy basically. And growing up in New Haven and going to public school there, I was often the only white boy, but it wasn't. It was Black and Latino people that I went to school with, and so I grew up somewhat with hip hop in the air. I didn't do it when I was in high school, but when I got out of it, I started to write, poetry, and hip hop infused my poetry. And the first show that I wrote was called No Lie, and it was about race, and in particular, sort of white people's role in race. And it was a hip hop play in which I played a bunch of different characters. And I performed this show for years. It was based on my experience in New Haven. And at a couple of performances, I performed it for lots of students in particular, and at a couple of performances, students would raise their hand after the show and ask, why aren't there any Asian people in this show? Which was a great question, and my only answer was like for myself, I didn't know any. I was growing up in New Haven around mostly Black and brown people and some white people, my relatives, and so for me, I wasn't conscious of the fact that there are tons of Asian people in New Haven, and so as I started to, instead of writing in a new character, which I did for a certain point in time, I would write in a new character each time New Haven changed. Byron had this idea at this particular time, and so I was very interested in particular because I often did feel kind of like an outsider growing up in New Haven, and was really interested in people who were very different from me. And this seemed like a story about someone who was really different from me.
I didn't know that. Because you learned about people you're working with. So yeah, so it's kind of an odd combo, I think. And I continue to think, but it seems to work. Aaron and I came together. What we're going to do now is talk and play and speak some of our work, so you kind of get a sense of what our aesthetic is. Is that right?
Do you want to talk a little bit more about yourself? I just
No.
for
No, I'll talk about myself in relation to my work. So, I'm the son of immigrants, and I have discovered for myself that I feel like in some sense I believe that there are these, continually like flips, and so what is a curse becomes a blessing, and once a blessing becomes a curse. And so, it's like, oh man, I was born in America, and so I'm an American citizen by birthright, but as a kid I didn't want to live in America at all, right? I wanted to live in Germany, right? I wanted to live in Europe because I'm trained as a classical musician. I play piano, I'm an only child, and so that was, my first best friend. And so I did actually when I was in my early 20s. I left, I had an immigration lawyer, I was in Canada, but I actually really, really missed being an American. And especially I think as an artist, because it's so convoluted and messed up to be an artist in this country. And what I missed was that sense of the struggle for trying to understand what it means to try and carve out a life here when there's something that has no value within within a system. Now I figured out it actually has a lot of value, right? And then I realized that the value, and I get it piecemeal. I get it from, for example, and this is related to this work that's coming up. This work I did called Kidnapping Water, Bottled Operas. One of the things I'm trying to figure out as an American artist is how to be really, really efficient, because I don't operate within it. I live in a capitalist society, but I don't operate within that, right? Like my work doesn't earn me, like the money exchange thing for the amount of time, like the value is kind of messed up, so I'm trying to figure that out. But and so I've been creating these one-person operas, right? Hence Stuck Elevator. One guy stuck in an elevator. It's an opera or operatic solo performance. Easy to produce, right? It's actually hell to like try and get out. But you think one person as opposed to like the 30 or 50 people on a Broadway stage that Jack was mentioning. So I did this piece called Kidnapping Water. I thought, great, one opera singer and a percussionist who doesn't even need percussion instruments because they can play water. And you don't need a venue, so the big budgets of opera, right, the $12 million opera sets, you don't need because you just go outside and you perform this. But what I did is I decided to do 64 of them. So I did this last summer, and there were 8 librettists. Each librettist wrote 8, and Aaron wrote a set of 8. And you're going to hear Hello Helicopter from this. Can you say anything else about it? So one singer, one percussionist playing in the water. Yeah, is that what I want to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is called Hello Helicopter. The words are by Aaron, the music is by me. To give you a sense of my
helicopter, everyone yell helicopter, chop chop, wave, wave, chopping through the sky above an Indian Ocean island, lakeways by a 10-foot wave, wave. We are in a helicopter looking for life in the flat-running land below, below. Miracle alone, a naked person looks up and lifts a hand as if to say hello. Hello, helicopter, 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 hello, hello, helicopter, chop chop, wave, wave, closer to the wave man, and we see he's not waving. No, no, he pulls our string back and lets an arrow fly with the force of a great wooden bow. But we know the metal of our chop 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 will split the arrow shaft in half. So we turn our video camera on the scene and have a helicopter, belly laugh. We are in a helicopter, helicopter, helicopter. Catch the helicopter, chop chop, wave, wave. Harold thinks of Pima Johnson and the man with both of them grim. We knew Kumusawatiku from the start. The helicopter is our great metallic cart. Blades beating, chop chop, bleeding gasoline. Harold leaves a question deep in the machine. Mr. Helicopter, 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 must you always chop, chop, wave, wave. Mr. Helicopter, 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 hear the people who you came to save. Helicopter, helicopter, wave.
Thanks. So the idea behind the basis of my music is singing and drumming. I feel that singing comes from the inside and drumming is the external. And it's also something that's portable. So one thing coming from the family I do is that my grandparents left China, and they, like my aunt, didn't have shoes until she was 11. So it's this idea of continual migration, my first CD is called Walking. So I'm really interested in this idea that maybe my family, my grandparents, those generations had been in one place for a long time, and then there's an event that happens in the late 30s, and so all of a sudden a family is dislocated and continually walks, or is continually nomadic. And so now I feel like I'm in this nomadic place, and so I feel like in order to survive, I must create a music that is similarly nomadic. So when I think about my classical music world, it's the sense that, oh, okay, well, that's irrelevant in the system I'm trying to operate in. I need to create something portable, right? This opera singer who can walk, and this percussionist who doesn't need drums. And so that's what came about. So there's 64 of those. They're mini musical works that can be performed in any way. And one thing I discovered, and this is where the value comes in, right? This is where we're in an advanced capitalist superstructure, but this is where we are actually really significant. So we perform these in 64 waterways throughout the Pacific Northwest. So it actually wasn't the writing the 64 or working with 8 librettists. It was actually performing them in waterways in different areas. But what we discovered is that the children were like, we performed in the summer. So for example, like Hello Helicopter was a favorite, right? Because kids were like, what the hell? Like what was it doing? And the percussionists, what were these like, you had these not plungers, but they were similar to plungers. And he was going around, the percussionist was going around in a circle, and then this guy was singing. And then the costume designer decided to do costumes that were made out of like tape material, shower curtains, things that would be found after a catastrophe, right? After there are no more opera houses left. What people would, because an opera singer still has to sing, percussionist still needs to play drums. So they went out there and did that, and the kids were like, wow, this is it, this is the bomb, right? And the parents would, and so they, but we would only do one. And so they'd be like, why did you do that? Do more. And so we ended up having to do one. And he actually, Helicopter, I don't know if you know this, but Helicopter, David actually did 3 times in one place for these kids because they were so into it. It's fun because they were like swimming and then they would stop, and they're like, more. And David's like, well, can I do another one? He's like, no, this is the location for Hello Helicopter. So we did that. So at the same time, this is when the earthquake in China was, right? And I was reading something where they were sending American actors to China, and I thought, oh no, is this going to be a story where I'm going to be embarrassed to be American again? But actually it wasn't. They were sending, along with food, water, medical supplies, these actors were going to play with the children because they were so devastated, because there were so many orphans, because so many families had been disrupted by the earthquakes, that they knew play was absolutely vital for their survival. And so the actors wanted to play with the children to reintroduce this sense. And I thought, wow, that's actually a role for art, right? And that was a discovery by doing Hello Helicopter 2, this totally elitist form of opera with, a trained, his voice is a bit rarefied, right? Mm-hmm. And yet the kids were the ones who were like, oh, this is kind of fun. So.
Yeah, I think that
Oh, yeah.
that sense of the ability of art to connect people and to people to things that are different, like the kids listening to opera or whatever, is something that made me kind of obsessed with doing art and theater. And this is another thing that I hadn't really realized until this moment, but Byron talking about the kind of portability of his art, his opera, which when I first encountered was I was kind of like those kids. I was like, what is this? You know, it was different from what I was used to. But my background, my coming into music was through hip hop, which coincidentally is also about making art, making music when you don't have anything, when all you have, you know, is your mouth to make up a little beat, and then your mouth to rap over it. You don't need training to learn how to sing. It's just you know. And so I think in that way, that's one of the things that has kind of subtly connected Byron and I. That interest in, excitement at, and kind of need to, almost financial, like need to do art that is that doesn't need all this crazy stuff. Another thing that I think connects my own experience with what Byron was talking about was that idea of migration. My father is obsessed with the history of my family, like where his folks have come from, and you know, some of whom were displaced, and so I'm actually about to do. I'll do a little poem that I wrote to give a sense of sort of where I was, the world that I was coming from before I met Byron. That also talks a little bit about that background, and it also gets a little bit at, I think, one of the things that excited me about hip hop, which was its sort of obsession with words and the sound of words. And that's something that looking through the eyes of Kwam, our character, has been really, really exciting to look at the English language through the ears and tongue of someone who is new to it. Yeah. So this poem is called Zafiolopolis, and it's from my father. When my grandfather, Jafferies Zafiolopolis, fled Turkey because Greeks were no longer welcome, he walked wave-drunk off of a boat onto an island named Ellis, easier to pronounce than his name, which ran off the tongue, twisting too many vowels for the immigration official's ear to fish for in one listening. So the official, quick-thinking surgeon, clipped the wings of my grandfather's name, whipped Jafferies Zafiolopolis in half, and christened him Jafferies, first name Thomas. Years later, rootless and wishing I knew anyone older than my father, I hear the legend of Jafferies Zafiolopolis and wonder who I would be, who I became when you cut my name in half. The Z in my name is the Zorba, the Zorro, the swashbuckling, unbuckled hero I'm not. The crazy zoo of humanness my mother forgot to tell me I could be. The L's in my name gave me permission to slide lovingly and roller coaster-like off of people's tongues and into people's mouths. You cut the L's out and 1,000 lovers I would have loved suddenly did not know me. And me, absent the L's in my name, did not know I could love. The P, the one explosive consonant in my name, you removed, a surgeon undoing a swollen appendix and dropping it into the Ellis Island sea of cut consonants, arguing with each other on the floor, surging, believing you removed some unnecessary and threatening part of me, when in fact it is my explosion, my great Greek heart and anger you have removed. so I am left still and calm and breezily plosive free. Lastly, you took from me 3 round and throaty O's, 3 mouths singing, O-buying their way through me. Gone my O's, I am eternally thin, hungry and wanting and collapsing in. You took away the room in me, the space to welcome others, so I am single, I am skinny, I am the opposite of open. So, one day, I will go back to the cutting room floor. Open the door of history and the murder mystery of names and families that Ellis Island is will come flooding out, and I will go fishing and find my O's, my L's, my P, my proud and long lost Z, and I will eat them, swallow them whole, and become Zaphiolopoulos, my whole self again. Yeah.
So this is fairly early on in Stuck Elevator, and it's called Open Doors Don't. In part, I don't know if you know this part of this. So this is prompted by the real story or the real incident of Ming Huang Chen. But prompted, right? It's not a documentary, so we're taking it somewhere else. One of the things that intrigued us, though, was that the security guards did hear him, but because he doesn't speak English well, they thought he was someone who was drunk, so they didn't do anything. So we took this as an opportunity to really investigate that. What does it mean when you don't speak English in America? So Open Doors Don't.
Mom, mail, doors, don't, kai, open, mail, mom, doors, don't, open, kai, doors, don't, open, don't work. I keep open, don't, mail, move, doors, kai, work, open. I keep, move, I need doors, open, need, work, move, mom, mail, doors, keep, kai, I keep, move, need, doors, open, doors. Don't open doors, need keep open doors, open need doors, open need keep work, open keep doors, keep open doors, keep doors,
咱年青时两海，又入金钱流水，抓不住口中叫几声几十人，路后是好，救命啊！来人！ It's a reading tomorrow, but because it's an opera, it's all sung through. So just to clarify that.
Yeah, and it's a solo opera.
Yeah.
So what you just heard actually, our performer Stephen Eng, he's recorded some of the stuff in sections where we need to hear his thoughts or hear other people in his life that he's thinking about in the elevator, or that visit him when he's really hungry and hallucinating, or when he's dreaming. He's recorded some of those things, and so he, so we double his voice in places. So he's performing live, as Byron just did, while his recorded voice is also happening. Yeah, and then there are moments when it's just him. Should we
Yeah, I wonder if we want to do that much, or
Yeah.
if we should cut something out. We want to get a gauge of how people are feeling. Like, do you like hearing? Because we're not performing this, so we're the writers. We're performing as kind of a default to interest you in coming to the performance tomorrow. But if you're like, oh man.
should we do two?
Yeah, we can do two more. Is that too much? No. No. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Shane?
Sure, yeah, okay, so, yeah, we asked about it. It's like, when I work with young people, when I'm teaching a high school class, like there's sometimes a rule, one mic, which means only one person was to talk at a time, but you're not actually using a mic. So this is just to keep Byron and I from like shouting at each other. So yeah, in Stuck Elevator, I'm a librettist, so I write all the words. Byron's a composer, so he writes the music. But usually, because my background is in hip hop, I write way too many words, and so I'll give Byron a lyric, and then he'll sort of go, trimming it down somewhat. I think this is an example of that, or is this one where I actually? Okay, this is one
I
where
don't remember.
maybe I actually showed a little bit of restraint. Well, you can.
Yeah. But do you want to talk about where it's coming from?
Yes.
What it's doing?
So the first thing you heard was pretty early on in the show when Kwong is just realized that he's stuck in the elevator and is trying to get help, talking to the intercom, the surveillance camera, knocking on the doors, trying to pry them open, etc. This song is somewhat later in the show. He's actually just passed the entire first night in the elevator, and he wakes up. He has a dream in which he. Can I say this?
I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that people ask a lot is, where did he pee? And so he pees himself.
Yeah.
In our story.
Yeah. So he pees himself, and that wakes him up. And he's been trying to communicate both to get out, but also he's been talking about his wife and son who are back in China. He's working to pay off the $60,000 debt to his relatives who paid the snakeheads who smuggled him here. But he's also trying to get his wife and son here eventually. So he's been trying to get people's attention.
Yeah, and one of the things we did is, it's Ming Kwang Chen, we decided to use his Kwang, which means moon. And so his son we named Wang Ye, which is brightness, and his wife we named Ming, which is another word for moon. So you'll hear Wang Ye and Ming, he refers to those two, his son Wang Ye and his wife Ming. So this is called So yeah, he's peed himself. He notices the security camera and he's like, shh. Wang Ye can never know that I was here. He will know honor and success, and dollars and the best. And when I die, he'll make an altar and put my portrait in a frame. change my name to Elevator Kwong and say that I am stuck because my English is so wrong. I don't know how to call for help, and I'm to blame. The guards cannot know that I am here. They'll ask me for my papers and see my name, then send me back to China, and Ming will see me wear the same old clothes. She'll cry because she knows, and each tear a mirror repeating my new name, which will be one more. Oh, I know. We'll do one more. We'll do one together.
Yes.
Yay. So the thing about being in Chinese, about being Chinese in America, is that Chinese doesn't necessarily mean person, right? If you say, I'm gonna go get Chinese, what does that mean, right? You don't say, oh, I'm gonna go get Italian, because that would mean something else. Or do you say that? Oh, maybe you say that. Oh, so maybe it's something else that. I'm gonna go Chinese. But there is this sense that Chinese somehow equals food in this country, and so we're playing a lot with this idea of food, with this idea of takeout box, and with this idea of hunger. And with someone who's we actually looked it up. It's you can survive for 10 days without water if the degrees it's about 70 to 80 degrees. In food, I think it's 5 days.
I think it's the reverse.
Oh, it's the reverse.
Yeah.
So he's hungry.
Yeah. So more time has passed,
Yeah.
but by the time we get to this.
seeing how this all fits together. I'll get the show over here. It's funny, Byron, when you were playing on the piano and and you were talking about peeing in the elevator, it just brought me back to this childhood memory of the way that my mother would get me to pee as a little kid. And of course, do that. So I was like sitting in my chair. I think, because as a historian, of course, unless you interview Yong you don't think you know the story. And that's kind of a frustration because, in fact, we're usually trying to document the stories of so many people like him, and we have no records, right? We might have a story, we might have a photograph, but that's all we have. Now, but in some ways it seems to me that what you're doing is not so much, only as you're saying, you're not doing the documentation, but also you're not trying to imagine you are trying to imagine what his experience is, but certainly in the piece on hunger, you're also kind of recreating what is a very kind of visceral experience. It's not this cognitive, what was he doing, how did he think, but it's like this gut level kind of situation, which is very human, very basic. So when you're trying to imagine what his experience was like, could you talk about that a little bit and how you're trying to come up with these things? Yeah. And we're going to open this up, but I thought I'd start with some questions.
Yeah. Aaron locks himself in the bathroom for how many hours?
Yeah, I don't remember for a while,
you didn't have the key or anything.
No, I think I just made the. I don't think I think I just made the rule that I couldn't get out. And it wasn't like I think in terms of it, that really helped center the physical, just the physical reality of it, of the discomfort of not being able to sit on something, of being in this small space, of trying I tried to sleep there, and that sort of thing really I think helped to connect physically to what's happening. And then I also, when I'm working on a particular part of the libretto, I will go and stand in my closet for a little while, and just to if it's a moment where I'm needing to feel this really cramped thing. Also the darkness at certain points, the lights going out, and also I think the panic of there's just a physical panic, and then also a loneliness that happens after a while, and so yeah, there are some just very sort of physical ways but I think obviously standing in my closet for a few minutes is not gonna get anywhere near Ming-Kwang Chen's experience, and so a lot of it is imagination, is also talking to people who have talked to him directly about his experience.
Yeah, I think that in terms went to the Tracy Towers and rode the elevators and made sure we had our cell phones with us. And it was fascinating. There were 6 elevators, there were 2 towers. Each tower has 6 elevators in the thing, and one of them where we were was out of order. So we went to Happy Dragon Restaurant. So there was that kind of very, like, going to the spaces that he would have inhabited. I've bicycled around the city. And one of the things that...
As a delivery man would.
Not as, not as a delivery man.
Yeah.
But as a, to get that
Getting a
sense
feel
of,
for what.
yeah, like what is that? Because I think a lot of, there's a sense of what is physically happening
Yeah.
to the character. But then there is this whole research component, right? So we're all reading The Snakehead, the book that just came out, Tamala is as well our director. And also collecting the articles and things like that. But I think we realize as writers that it is that that's something that's not said. Like, an author is going to have a certain perspective on what a story is. And so, it's oftentimes it's reading that, but kind of reading, we're learning about the author rather than about the people they're covering. Is that, yeah. And so, it's that kind of research. And so it's a very messy research.
I mean, the author of Snakeheads, for example.
Yeah,
So
correct.
saying-
Yeah. And so I'm kind of learning, oh wow, this is a really interesting tactic to take on this subject matter.
So you have to kind of read underneath and try to triangulate and try to kind of think about yourself as someone who comes from a parallel background but not quite the same. And so has some of that background helped you get at some of this?
My background?
Your background.
I think that one of the things I'm realizing is that there's so many different Chinese, like there are many different Chinas, and that what happened during the Cultural Revolution effectively distanced the people who had left before, the overseas Chinese, and the mainland Chinese, because there's such a different sense when I'm there, and even here, like the people who like Michelle Chai, who's overseas Chinese, is, from Southeast Asia, similar to my family, there's a connection that is not, and even when people from Taiwan or Hong Kong, I feel like, right, there's like these different, and even with you, like, I'm not sure what generation you are, but I have a sense that you're kind of more Chinese American. And
I'm a 1.5.
oh, okay. So, yeah, I don't know if that doesn't answer the question. Maybe it does. I think it's the convoluted sense. And that's actually what brings it back to, because we've been in rehearsal, like we started rehearsal at, what time this morning? 10? 10, yeah, right. And so we're learning so much, and one really great thing is this, that Tamala brought up is, oh wait, well what's Kwang's relationship with Chinese America, because he's Chinese, right? And what's his relationship with because I have a different relationship with the takeout box.
The takeout box.
Yeah, or orange beef, or
Right.
right. So,
Have you had a chance to see the film Takeout?
yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
what was your reaction? I don't know how many people in the audience have seen that film. We actually showed it last year. It's really an incredible independent film that has actors, but they're not trained actors, as far as I know. I think there might be maybe some trained actors, but it's really about a similar circumstance in which all of a sudden he has to, this one delivery man has to make up the money very quickly. But he's not being stuck, but there's a different kind of being stuck that he's involved in. So in some ways, being stuck in an elevator is really quite effective as a metaphor for the larger experience of, especially in documented words. So how did it go from, okay, so you're writing this and you're putting yourself in these very phobic situations, or just kind of trying to imagine and beginning to kind of write some ideas down, and then how does it develop to the point that you pass it over to Byron on any particular piece, and he begins to play with it in terms of the sounds
It's actually, we way before I lock myself in the bathroom, we talk about it forever. And so in terms of the structure, in terms of what each song is going to be, in terms of you know, what a little bit about what the lyrical world might be, so we'll really have done a lot. So in terms of sort of creating the story and what's happening when, that's, you know, that's all happening together first, and then for a particular moment, I'll write something. Often Byron will give feedback, and then I'll rewrite it before he even messes around with it musically. And sometimes he'll start to mess around with it, and we have this, a lot of times it's a long distance collaboration, which is another reason why this residency is so amazing, because Byron's in Seattle and I'm in New Haven most of the time. So we'll send stuff over the internet, and kind of just go back and forth and make each other do it over and over until we like the other person's work.
So, I mean, if you could give us just a little example of maybe something you write.
The first iteration of that song was called Disappear, where he disappears. And then that didn't quite work, so we thought, well, okay, no one's listening. And so, in other words, it kept going through different rewrites, and it actually went through musical rewrites too, because we haven't found it yet. And so we are about at 10, I think, right? Because now there's a superhero involved. And then there was Superman. I'm like, I'm not sure about Superman. So there was Invisible Man. I'm like, no, that's like a sci-fi, you know. And so now there's another superhero. I know. So, anyways, and for this ending, because it's so long, the lyric is so long, and because it's the end of Act 1, it's scene 20 right now, and I'm like, you know what, I need to be able to write musically something really simple that just, so the audience doesn't have to think about, like, tracking, you know, this complicated music. They can just enjoy, right, so they'll want to come back, even if the lyric is complicated, the meaning of the lyric. And so I proposed this structure, right, which didn't scan. In other words, the words didn't follow, and so if you want something to repeat musically and the words aren't scanning, they're not following the same way, it was a mess, and I was so upset, like, Aaron. So he was a bit embarrassed, if I may, and so he wrote this beautiful lyric. He's like, I wrote you an AABA song, right? Very, very simple song. I think it can go in Act 2, right? And I got it and I started it for a while, and then I started singing it, and you know, I wrote some lyrics, but then it came out like easily within the night, and I was like, wow, it is. It's a really, really beautiful moment, and I think it's there to stay. Like, it's probably 90% there, right?
So this is a different song than Are You
Correct.
Listening? This is one, because I was so embarrassed that I was being so difficult a lyricist for Byron to work with, because I often write lyrics that just sort of meander and don't have a particular structure, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a song that's, you know, and so that was the one that's now in the second act, but Byron's continued insistence that Are You Listening needed a structure, then resulted in attempts at creating a chorus for the song, which it didn't have before. It was just, you know, something that is repeated. So the current version for the first time has a chorus, a hook, and Byron also contributes lyrics, like he will rearrange stuff or contribute new words, and he and his father also contribute somewhat in terms of the Mandarin that's in the show. Those lyrics.
So the father in terms of language. Your father, yeah. In terms of language consultation, but other things as well? Or?
Yeah, and actually translating.
Okay.
Yeah. He's really good at poetic he's like, oh, well, that's not really, which is fine. I mean, that's the part of translation. So it's not literal. And then Aaron goes back and changes sometimes the lyric.
Right. Well, let's open it up, because, I mean, in some ways you've got a little bit of a taste, I mean, and I'd love to kind of maybe hear your questions about specific pieces that were done, or broader questions. Yes, please.
I just had a question about like the language. Why did you use Mandarin as opposed to Fujianese? You know,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because do you speak it or?
Yeah, I speak Minahua, which my
Oh.
cousin told me is because our family comes through Xiamen.
Mhm.
So it
Oh,
actually isn't
right.
what
Right, it
we
isn't,
think.
right.
Yeah.
I see, okay.
Initially, it was like 2 different Chinese languages, and then no, so that's why it's.
Oh, it's in Mandarin, okay. I just wanted to know.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it raises those language questions that you're kind of bringing up, which in some ways you can be very literal about, but also it seems to me you're thinking about it in a sonic kind of way as well,
Yeah.
working across cultures, right? So it's not so literal,
Yeah.
this language or that dialect. Yeah.
May I just follow up this question about language? I'm wondering like how much Chinese is used in this opera, and with this question, would you also like tell us what kind of audience you're expecting? Like I was telling this the Chinese coming to New York at 9 years old in Chinatown, this Chase Bank. I told him like this is going to happen in this Museum of Chinese in America. He knows nothing about it. He's a Chinese, okay? And thank you.
So, in terms of how much Chinese is in the show, I don't know, percentage fraction wise. Right now, maybe a tenth or something like that. It's sort of it's in terms of literally the number of words, it's a lot smaller than the amount of English words, and I think that something that we're kind of trying to find is a way in which the placement of the Chinese and the particular words that he does speak in Chinese can help give the sense that actually he is speaking or thinking to himself almost entirely in Chinese the whole time, so that I think that's a balance that we're struggling with, and that I think we'll be really interested to get feedback from the reading about that, because to get to the audience question, I think we are really interested in the person that you just mentioned coming to see this and really getting a whole lot out of it, and also someone who doesn't speak any Chinese to see it. I think we're interested in. And you talked about you gave a good example in terms of things working on different levels for different folks. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, but that was more instance of Byron.
Right.
Other than language, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we wanted as broad an audience as possible, and I think a lot of times when people go in that direction, breadth sacrifices depth or truth, and so I think that's our struggle, to make sure that we can still be really true to this character, so that he can be, in a way, as you were sort of hinting at, a kind of everyman who has these universal issues that he struggles, but also fiercely specific to this undocumented Fujianese immigrant delivery man reality.
And I think part of the question is also audience access, but I mean, we realize that we don't have a Chinese translation for, right, to let people know. And the work now as it is, couldn't be understood by a Chinese speaker. And I think part of my ideal audience is for the people it represents. But my realization is that they work 24/7. They do not go to the theater, right? And so, in order for this to reach that, it's part of a long-term struggle to actually reach the people in power. And so that's why I'm so interested in opera, because people in power go to the opera in this country, right?
That's true.
Seriously. And so, there's songs like hip hop, rap, musical theater, and yet we are placing it in this, elitist container in hopes of reaching people with power who can start to think about these characters and the people who, because my thing is, when I stand in New York, I see them, and maybe after tonight you'll start noticing, and I'm like, wow,
You see who?
Sorry, yeah, I never finish my sentences. I see delivery.
Okay, yes.
Right, and I'm like, there they are, and I didn't notice before, but it's through working on this and being hyper-conscious, and so I'm hoping that hyper-consciousness, just by having this character on a stage.
In an interesting way, that's true in terms of looking for people of power, too. Because I think people of power can be somewhat invisible as well. And as you begin to tune in on both types of people, then it becomes interesting. And New York is a place in which, on the same block, you just be standing there for half an hour and you can begin to kind of tease that out. But it also raises the interesting question of, let's say, 2 years from now, and this is a piece that you've performed and have kind of achieved a kind of mix and kind of interesting high culture kind of frame, container that you're saying, but at the same time be able to kind of get the more gutsy kind of message out. Can you see perhaps, as you're saying, maybe translating this in a way in which it can be performed to Chinese-speaking audiences? Of course, that's so tricky because there's so many different dialects, but let's say a Mandarin and maybe with some Fujianese. Because that requires a different kind of process. It's not so much a question as a 50-50, 50% Chinese and 50% English, because that's going to satisfy nobody. It's not going to really work sometimes either way creatively. It may not work. But in some ways it needs a translation for that audience, and it maybe isn't even a literal process, but it requires another collaboration. I don't know if that's something that you thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the way that this work is translatable in that sense is, I think we think very much of energy and very much of the truth of the situation, right? Which is translatable.
Yes, right.
Right.
Yeah, and I think in terms of translating also, I think one of the things that we're excited about with the residency is part of the residency, part of it is working with students at NYU, and so that new work kind of inspired by this will spring up. And I think in a way that's another kind of translation, sort of responding to themes and issues of this. So I think our hope is that wherever this is performed, that sort of thing will happen. And another thing that I think this is kind of a tangent, but you connected to what we were just talking about, and also to what you were saying, or I can't remember who said it before, about the risk that a lot of these workers have because they're easy prey, they're carrying around a lot of cash and are somewhat reticent to go to police and that sort of thing. So I think just in terms of the potential impact of people noticing this and attention being paid in my hometown in New Haven, where there is a large undocumented immigrant population. There it's more Latin American. There were some really strong organizers who were talking about this problem, that undocumented immigrants were being mugged, would not be able to do anything about it, or would be unlikely to. And so after a couple of years of organizing and really kind of raising consciousness about this issue, the city government in New Haven began issuing city ID cards, which are both can serve as ID for police and as kind of default ATM cards. So it works as a bank account as well. There's like a swipe thing, so now undocumented immigrants in New Haven, and it sort of also was kind of said we're a friendly city for undocumented immigrants, and so that actual change, which has sort of helped with this particular situation, is something that has come about in part because of just sort of increased visibility, and so I think our hope is, also that this could have repercussions in that way in terms of when people in power do start to notice.
So part of your intention is to have this work really be engaged and be a forum in which people begin to think about things that they haven't necessarily thought about, to notice things that they haven't noticed before, issues, because a lot of people who do this, we're turning into a service economy in New York, and people who do the service work are kind of made invisible. That's part of what they're meant to be, is to be omnipresent and always there for the people who are using them, but at the same time disappear as soon as they can, once they perform that service. Yeah. Are there some more comments that people would like to make? And so really, oh yes, please.
Going to what Byron had said before, that you want to reach elite people of power, when both of you were collaborating on this, were there certain ideas or themes or points that you wanted to get across in your work, and if so, what are some of those?
One of them that we're really intrigued by right now is the idea of hope in this country, and what does that mean? And is hope only reserved for certain people? Or that's something I'm really trying to figure out through this work. And hope comes through every so often as a lyric.
I think I know that my
Just a little announcement is they're going to test the alarm system for this building. But don't worry. When is this going to happen?
Within a few seconds.
I'm sorry. Unforeseen.
But it'll just last a few seconds.
I don't know if you want to go on.
Yeah, no. I think the idea of disappearing and how we can disappear people is something that we're interested in exploring the different ways that happens, and also the many different ways that you're talking about the elevator as a metaphor in which folks are stuck, and how can we help each other get unstuck? I don't know. I've been trying to like get weed out some of the things that I want to try to say because Kwong wouldn't say the things that I want to say necessarily. And so, yeah.
Yes.
I came late, so maybe you said this in the beginning, but did you mention what became of this particular delivery man in real life? Is he back in China, or is he here in the United States somewhere? Is he, does anybody know what happened to him? And wouldn't you love him to see your opera? And does he have any idea that you've written it or anything like that?
As far as we know, he's in Philadelphia. We don't know if he knows about this project, but
Yeah, I think we would love for him to see it.
It's a very complicated process, as you can imagine, because he is undocumented, he went through this experience. We don't really know, so as Byron said earlier, that we've been in contact with the lawyers who were working with him at the time this happened, but they themselves, I think, are somewhat out of touch with him as well. Clearly we understand that for somebody in his position, it's also, they don't necessarily want to appear on stage here at NYU talking, and so we'd love to, at the same time, and that's one of the issues that we kind of, talked about early on in this whole process. But at the same time, we have to kind of respect who he is and where he's at in this point in his life. I think this whole question of the long term is a really important one, because that long-term arc is where maybe some of these things may begin to reveal themselves. And I've known Byron long enough that I know that you're in it for that long term, and that I'm hoping maybe at some point when he might be ready after you perform this, and then maybe he has his papers or something at that point, that he might be somebody who would reveal himself, and that conversation can happen in the future. But in the meantime, there are a lot of people who we all know who have actually been through a variation of this experience. So in some ways, it's not like, of course, his experience is unique, but at the same time, I think there's so many undocumented workers, whether they're Latino or Chinese or Fujianese, the particularities are different, but also some of the basic things are meant to be very resonant, right? And that visceral level is part of something that gets communicated. Well, listen, we need to wrap up. I wish we had more time, but there's a chance now to have a reception. I just wanted to kind of, before we all go upstairs and have some wine and food and all that, I did want to mention we've got a couple of events coming up at APA, and okay, one of them is, here we go. Crystal Perick, who's a professor here, has just come out with a very important book, An Ethics of Betrayal, the Politics of Otherness in Emergent U.S. Literatures and Culture. Crystal's right here, and we're having her do a book reading on Thursday between 6 and 8, the 22nd, Tuesday night. So please come to that.
That's when you have to RSVP by.
Oh,
It's
that's-
the 24th.
Sorry, 24th, I'm reading this incorrectly, 24th, which is Thursday. And then the day after that, that Friday, Jack Shaheen, who is an amazing journalist and retired professor, has written two very important books called Guilty, Hollywood's Verdict on Arabs After 9/11, and Real, R-E-E-L, as in the film Real, Bad Arabs, How Hollywood Vilifies the People. He'll be here speaking, and we'll be having a discussion about really the similarities between kind of anti-Arab, Islamophobia, and yellow peril kinds of fears. But also, we're in the process, hopefully, of bringing his collection to NYU. So it's really part of our archival process as well. So in any case, I wanted to mention those, but please join me in thanking Aaron.